I come bearing a cart on wheels, and not just any wheels, but wheels with a medieval attitude with an addiction for survivor-like sessions. Meet Carnage Kart X, a Frankenstein experiment between Mario Kart and Vampire Survivors. I was sent an email regarding this game, and it was somewhat a concept that I'd not really thought of prior. However, we are in a period where things like Steam Next Fest come by and release a surge of demos for new and promising projects with interesting and unique ideas that raises eyebrows and spits out the drink that you've been craving all morning. Well, I'm no stranger when it comes to survivor-like games and kart racing games. Both genres have their own levels of replayability, frustration, fun, and chaos intertwining into their own respective and unique experiences. Mario Kart in particular can be equally casual but also ultra competitive at the same time, and to think that you can't get angry at a game like Mario Kart is just sheer foolishness. Play with a group of friends and try to get in first place without getting tilted by the blue shell, and then we'll talk. And on the camp of survivor likes, they are generally mixed in their executions because some either really click with me or they just run out of magic tricks and there's not much reason to stay any further due to sheer boredom. But with Carnage Kart X, it's a game with a unique idea that I haven't really seen anywhere else, or at least nothing that I have found so far. I love Mario Kart, where it's simple but skillful in the genre of racing that can make for some good sessions with friends, bringing out the best and the worst of them at the same time, and where solo play can also be a fun experience. Carnage Kart X takes that aspect of Mario Kart, or at least some parts of it, and blends it with survival-like gameplay. The premise here is that you are a knight on a cart, and you'll be battling hordes of enemies that come in different shapes and sizes, from zombies to ghosts, bats, goblins, and whatever abominations transpire. For 5 minutes, you'll be karting through enemies, completing challenges, and collecting gold and soul shards for new weapons and upgrades until the clock runs out and you can leave the arena. Either that or you have to fight a boss before completing the stage. When you complete the stage, you get the option to participate in a bonus race. These races are key to unlocking the next stage if you can complete the best lap time and overall record for the race. Depending on what position that you're in, you can also win more soul shards if you come first. So mastering the game's handling model is going to be important, especially if you want to unlock more stages. It's a game with a pretty cool concept on paper, but it's also a game that needs a lot of work, and some things I believe should be reassessed and also added in for more variety and better balancing of the general gameplay. So let's start with some positives first. The handling feels pretty solid. The mix of 3D environments and 2D sprites gives it this SNES-like graphic style that's a bit more capable than what that platform had going for it at the time. On top of the set pieces you have this gloomy but atmospheric approach to the blend of racing and horror, where both genres can actually gel really well when done right. Just look at Nightmare Kart and you'll see exactly what I'm talking about. The weapons you do have function differently from each other, where they have different strengths and different weaknesses. With the sword, you can cleave enemies from the side, but you're vulnerable at the front. With the bow and shuriken, you can attack enemies in front of you, but you don't have the security of blades helping you on the side, which can make you susceptible to hitting an enemy directly, which is how you take damage in the first place, by hitting the enemies directly, instead of with your weapon. On easy and normal, you can eventually heal your health if you don't hit anything, but on hard, I don't seem to be able to do this, and as far as I know, the game doesn't go out of its way to tell you this. The difficulties seem to boil down to the volume of enemies and gold on the map, and I honestly don't find hard mode that fun to play at all. And the only reason that I would even pick hard mode in the first place is purely for grinding the gold, because I can get more of it on this difficulty than I can on easy or normal. And I do this so I can get more important upgrades to unlock the later stages. Saying that, when it does come to the slaughtering of the enemies with your trusty cart, it can be satisfying at times, especially when you get them in droves. Seeing the numbers go up in both your kill count as well as the currency you collect is another staple in survivor-like or bullet heaven games, where this power fantasy builds up if you continue to upgrade what you've got, both for your weapons and for your kart. And in other survivor-like games, you build up this sort of build progression system upon your character where they get more and more stupidly powerful over time, and you start to just wipe everything in front of you if you do everything right. But back onto Carnage Kart X, the gold that you do get is used for the weapons and the upgrades associated with them, and the soul shards are for the kart, which you can use to upgrade the speed, health, durability, handling, and the boost, which will make a difference, especially on repeated runs. The replayability itself comes from the desire to grind out the available unlocks, and with the stuff that I already mentioned, you do have some nice cosmetics that also add additional bonuses to your stats. With the atmospheric Castlevania-like vibes, the catchy music that makes you feel like you're clearing an old-school Castlevania level, and the simple but enjoyable gameplay, it certainly has some things going for it overall, making for a pretty solid game, especially for its asking price. But at the same time, it still has some downsides, and there are some things that definitely need to be added or reassessed, need to be looked at again for a more balanced experience with more stuff going for it. For starters, I find it aggravating that with the bonus races, I have to spend 5 minutes every single time and survive before I even get a chance to practice. And this is even worse on the later stages when you complete the 5-minute phase and then you have to fight a boss where they can absolutely drag on, especially if you can't get enough consistent damage on them while you're trying to outmaneuver all of the enemies that are just bum rushing you. When you have to repeat a specific challenge in the race just because you were off by a few seconds, it is extremely annoying given the circumstances of how you get to do the bonus race to begin with. There is no way to restart the race to try again and get the challenge done. And if you do want to try again, you have to do the entire stage all over again. And this, again, like I said, is even worse when you start fighting the bosses, where they can and will drag the fuck on when you cannot consistently pull in some damage on the boss while being surrounded by the population of a small town. There really needs to be some sort of alternative option for the races. An option to just skip the stage so that you can just do the race after you've completed that stage. I do not want to waste 5 minutes every single time just to have a go on the track and try to break records. For the love of Talos, make it an optional mode. And if you're concerned about the soul shards that you can get from the races, just disable it for the optional mode and keep the challenges available to complete. Mario Kart in general has a practice mode for the tracks where players can freely explore them and practice conquering the track's layouts, which becomes very important when you're doing the higher CC cups or if you're playing the game more competitively, especially in the original Mario Kart where the NPCs can literally cheat and abuse items constantly. Carnage Kart X would benefit from having a dedicated corner for the game's racing system, which is already good enough for a retro racing experience like Super Mario Kart. Having a practice mode that allows room for more consistent and frequent practice can also help during these stage attempts because, again, it absolutely sucks when you spend the 5 minutes surviving and then slog your ass through a boss fight that can drag the fuck on, beating said boss, doing the track, only to be a second behind and failing those specific challenges. That is content locked and you have to repeat the entire sequence again if you want to see more of the game. You have no other choice. I hope that in the future some sort of alternative mode is added where you don't have to always do the stage and you can just do the racetracks, even if it means disabling the unlocks of soul shards. Say for example, if you do the whole stage and then you get to the race, you unlock the soul shards, but if you skip the stage, there should be some sort of system in place where players can't, exploit the earning of soul shards through bonus races. However, they can do the challenges at the very least. See, that would be a good compromise to cut a lot of the fat and repetition that comes from repeating the stages. Because the stages in the racetracks themselves are quite good. And the handling model is also quite good, and it's a shame that there really isn't a way to practice it consistently without going through the main loop first. While on the topic of the racing part still, there is an opportunity here to consider as well, such as the implementation of co-op-based gameplay like you would see in Vampire Survivors, as well as a local multiplayer component for the race courses. The game tries to be a blend of both, and I honestly think the idea is really cool, but I'm left with, not a great deal at this point in time, and I'm wanting for more. So you have the races that can feel like an eternity to get to, and I was very lucky to get through stage 4 and 5 on the first go with the race courses and complete all of the challenges in one sequence. Then you have the other side of the game, the survivors-like loop. Your character has a kart that can run over enemies, use boosts to go even faster, jump up in the air, using abilities slotted to the jump system like the slam or double jump or 360 dash, these kind of abilities that you can pick over the other. Your primary weapon could be from a sword to a bow, a shuriken, and a spellbook. The secondaries that you have, they play more of a support role while still dealing some damage. They operate around your character's main attack loop, so you don't really have to think about it at all. In fact, the weapons behave automatically in the same way as they do in Vampire Survivors. However, there is still some aiming required, and with the sword you have to align it against the enemies to cleave through them, and with other weapons you have to aim it in a certain position to even hit the enemies. Now for weapons with range, you don't just have the third person camera, but you've also got a first person camera, which can make it easier when you're using the bow or the shurikens. That way you can properly ascertain where you're aiming at exactly, because sometimes with third person, depending on how the camera is placed, it can somewhat obscure your vision with the weapon where you're not really sure if you're aiming exactly right. But with the first person camera, this problem can be negated somewhat, so there is that to consider. As I've said on the strengths and weaknesses of the weapon, they function differently somewhat. One weapon may be more preferable to the other depending on what stage you do, so you'll have to factor in whether the sword is useful on one stage or useless on the other, but it may also just boil down to how well you can handle each of the weapons, and so far they all seem to handle fine, I guess. When it comes to grinding the gold, I found the sword to be useful on the first level, while putting it on hard difficulty, which increases the spawns and the coin drops, making it a quicker way to get further upgrades, which by the way you will need, like I said, to unlock the remaining stages. Each stage progressively gets harder, and they have their own unique curveballs that shake up the way you approach the map. The castle is pretty rudimentary and there's not much to worry about in terms of the hazards, but then the second level and onwards, they start throwing different kinds of enemies that can throw projectiles on you, and some can also lay traps, like in the forest where these spider-like enemies can lock you in for a few seconds while you get swarmed by everything else. Then there are also water hazards or green liquid hazards that will instantly kill you if you fall into them, which I personally find to be cheap. And in the final level, it is easy to fall into this if you're not watching where you're going, on top of the traps that are also there that will destroy you if you're not being careful. In Mario Kart, the worst that could happen when you fall into a trap or you fall into some water is that it would slow you down during the race. However, you would eventually recover or get picked up and then you're on your merry way. But in this game, you just die and the run's over. For the maps that have this kind of hazard, I would recommend having double jumps so that you can jump across certain traps or jump across water or the green liquid. And this can also act as a bypass in the final level where you can literally just jump across to the other side where you're supposed to be for the final boss. For a while, the game can be fun. The driving feels pretty good. Grinding is a pain in the ass at first, but once you get the hang of it, it's not bad. The weapons are effective when upgraded. The challenges that you can find on the map are sometimes manageable, and sometimes they are actually worth doing since you can get lucky on getting even more gold. The idea in general is almost there, but not quite, because at a certain point I was already kind of checked out from the game, so to speak, and I just felt like I saw everything there was to see. One thing that I felt was sorely lacking in the game was the insane build variety that can be found in games like Vampire Survivors, where your character can collect and synergize a number of different weapons and items together to achieve a godlike sort of status. In Carnage Kart X, you have just the primary and the secondary that you select, the upgrades to your kart as well as the jump ability that you select. but you can only select one primary and secondary at a time, and you're stuck on this rudimentary path for 5 minutes until the arena is cleared. Not once did I ever really feel like that I could become untouchable, that I could just destroy literally everything around my path if I worked towards it. Like a god on wheels, with a myriad of weapons and items to synergize in real time, and I felt like that was missing here. What you do have currently is only really good for those 5 minutes, and if it was extended any further, it would eventually just become boring eventually. And sure, you do have some pickup items on the map, but it's not much different from what you see in other survivor-like games or in Vampire Survivors, where they're just more like pick-me-ups rather than literal upgrades that have a permanent effect on your character as you go through the run. Build variety and build progression are a huge core component of games like Vampire Survivors, and even though some games have characters with a dedicated weapon, they also throw a number of items for various effects, buffs, and new attack patterns from other types of weapons collected together that I feel is just missing in this game. Sure, you could mow down a good number of enemies in succession, but you'll just be doing that with the sword and the throwing axe if you select that, or just the bow and the lance, or just the spellbook and totem, without any further additional weapons or buffs to add to your kart's arsenal that makes you feel a lot stronger than you are. Compared to other survivor-likes, it just feels very basic, and I never really reached a point where I felt like I could just destroy the whole planet with a kart. But what is there in its foundation is pretty simple and fun. It just needs a lot more variety in its gameplay loop to find a way how to progress the capabilities of the kart in real time with further item builds while keeping the challenge consistent. So far, I have gotten up to the final level, but after a few tries clearing the dungeon and then a moment of getting to the final boss, only to get beamed to death with fucking aimbot, I just ended up calling it a day and decided to move on, because at that point, I was just done. I did not care anymore. In the game's current state, it really needs a lot more work. In saying that, I will still recommend it to anyone out there looking for a unique and interesting experience, especially for those who are into kart racing and also enjoy games like Vampire Survivors. The music is good, the atmosphere is gloomy and creepy, the kart handling is good and feels like a more modernized version of Super Mario Kart. There are incentives for further grinding thanks to the upgrades, and the race courses, when you can do them, can be fun to drive in. But the game just needs a lot more time in the oven. It needs more features and modes to make the experience richer and more in-depth. So here are my personal suggestions on how you could possibly improve the game further. Have a practice mode for the tracks for more consistent practice or just to play around in, a co-op mode for stages, and a race mode with other players for a bit of Mario Kart fun. For the survivors-based gameplay, there should be some form of in-game progression where your kart can benefit from powerful item builds that makes your character feel like a god on wheels, all the while increasing the scale of the enemy difficulty, kind of like what you see in Vampire Survivors. At some point, having more customization options for your kart would also be neat, where you can apply different parts and make the kart not only unique but different in its handling model, its speed, and its power. Additional liveries would be another source of eye candy to appreciate while playing the game. It is still a good game, despite what I've said. Its foundations are strong enough to build on and improve further. But in its current state, I'm kinda just done with the game, and I'm going to wait until it gets developed further to see how the game holds up then. For the meantime, I would urge anyone to send their support to these guys, because they need all the help they can get. They definitely need more reviews on their Steam page to get more attention in general, and I do want to see this game improve further and have more added to it, where it becomes a more realized version compared to what it is now. The idea is really cool. I do want this game to succeed, but the execution currently is a work in progress, and the game just needs more time in the oven. That's it. Stay safe, everyone, and thanks for watching.